This morning, Martha is with us, and her topic is Comfort is the Key, Experiences with People in Distress. So let's welcome Martha.
Thank you very much. I have a ton of notes, and then I cut them down, and then I cut them down, and then if any of you know me, I am not shy. I speak best when you just ask me questions. So I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction on why I feel qualified to talk about Comfort is the Key. And I'm writing a book of that title called Comfort is the Key, Writing Poetry with the Seabury Scribblers. And we'll talk about that later. So let me tell you the way I feel, why I am qualified with nothing except experience and no schooling. So don't ask me about the medical dynamics of people in distress. From my way of thinking, I have had three major experiences. Based on the fact that my mother was an incredible woman, and despite the fact that it was the Depression and the war and McCarthy and all the rest, she taught all of us that to be a volunteer is the best thing you can do. You must help people in trouble. If you earn a quarter, save a nickel and give it to the poor. And we didn't have a nickel to save or a quarter to save, but we learned, all of us, four girls, that it was important that we volunteer. And we really started young in World War II. We rolled bandages, knit terrible socks, stuffed packages full of non-perishable food to send overseas. So that's my heritage, okay? My first major experience with people in true distress was at the age of 51. I moved from Brooklyn, which was a kind, nurturing place, to Manhattan, where I thought if they knew I came from Brooklyn, they'd throw me out. So I decided the best way to make New York connections was to be a volunteer. Only one problem: I could only work at night, because I worked full-time during the day. So I went to the New York Public Library. They wanted somebody in the gift shop on Saturday. I went to the Little Branches. They weren't open at night. I went to the museum. I wasn't qualified to do anything. So one day I was talking with somebody, and I said, gee, I'd love to do something at night. I need to meet people, and there's nothing I can do. And she said to me, of course there's something you can do. Sloan Kettering needs volunteers all the time. In case you don't know, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Research Center was this is back in, wait a second, let me look. I was 51. It was, I don't even have the year. We can do some quick arithmetic. I must have been 52, because I had moved when I was 51. And I was afraid of going there. Cancer Center at that time, Memorial Sloan Kettering at that time, was people in serious, serious trouble. Because basically the only people they were taking at that time were people in advanced stages of disease, or people who had very interesting cases that they could study and use pretty much as guinea pigs. These people went in as a last resort. So I went over there, and they grabbed me up. What did I want to do? My love of books led me to the library. You know, I'll sit in the library. So I came in at night, sat in the library, and there weren't many people coming in the library. It was late, they were sick, they were tired. But every now and then, somebody would wander in, and they wanted a book. But more than that, they wanted somebody to talk to. They wanted no doctors, no nurses, no family crying over them. What they wanted was comfort. So we chatted and we talked, and they told me about themselves, and I told them what I wanted to do. It was amazing. I was there for 10 years till I couldn't do it too much anymore. Every week we would come in, we were what they call visiting volunteers, and our job was to make people comfortable. And we never knew where we were going to be assigned. One night, they wouldn't let me do anything with the little children. That was kept for younger people who could get down on the floor and play with the kids and make them happy. But one week I'd be assigned to the breast cancer floor. Another week I would go to gastrointestinal. I'd go to head and neck. I never knew where I was going, so I had to learn quickly how to speak with people. And it was a trick. You walk down the hall, and if anybody was with a doctor or family or anybody, you just smiled and walked by. But if they looked at you, and they looked like, please, I just want to talk, you would go in. And what do you talk about? You say, hi, where are you from? I come from Brooklyn. Where did you come from? Half of them were from overseas on their last chance for help. And it didn't take too long. It certainly didn't take 10 years to discover that one of the things they needed the most was comfort. I like to think that I have 3 experiences, 2 from the outside looking in at people in distress, and 1 from my own experience of needing comfort. I call that viewing the world from within, looking out. My second major experience was right here in Seabury. I came here and, you gotta volunteer for something. So I, show movies, well, that's okay. I joined the library committee, but I was very busy. And so I went to Jackie Cross and asked her if she needed anything. And when she said, would you be willing to go to the Meadows, our mental support facility over here, she was delighted. Now, 2 people want to go on a regular basis. And I said, what can I do? What do you need? Well, anything you want to do. So I came in ready to read stories. So I went in and I was afraid. Who wants to go and spend, of us, tons of time in a place where we might also wind up? Good chance over a certain age, we will be over at the Meadows. And I was really scared. But I walked in and there was Amy Marble with her arms wide open and she's saying, look everybody, here's Martha, she's gonna come and talk to us. And the reaction was amazing. Some of them slept, some of them were totally, they couldn't have cared less. Some of them greeted me with a smile. One lady even got on her walker, rushed over and said, oh, I'm so glad to see you again. I've missed you. All they wanted was a friendly face. Those who were sleeping, Amy said, don't believe it. They're probably hearing everything you said. And there was proof of that. I'd have people come and I thought they were sleeping through the whole thing, and at the end they'd get up and tell me what a wonderful time they had, and they wished I came back. Most of them didn't remember my name. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Most of the residents, I hate when we say them and we. They are residents and they are patients, and they have to be treated with respect, with love, and with comfort. They are, as the residents there, as a group, I found the most loving, giving, affectionate people I have ever met. I was at home immediately. So, of course, being a writer, a reader, whatever, I started reading. The first day I learned an important lesson, and that was anything long, don't do. The attention span is short. I started with Alice in Wonderland, what could be better? And that went over like a lead balloon. So the next week I brought in a fairy tale, and that was okay. When I showed pictures, that was the best. People who had dozed really liked to look at the pictures. So it sort of went from up here down to A.A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh and all his wonderful poetry. Poetry, here we're getting. Then I brought in the Jabberwocky. Well, that's a funny sounding little poem from Alice in Wonderland. And it dawned on me, not only pictures, the earlier the better, rhymed with pictures. What could be better than Dr. Seuss? So I would bring in Dr. Seuss, and it got a wonderful reception. And one day I ran out of things to read. They're very short. And that day I was in a great big room. What Amy had done was she had set aside a small room and later, and that she called the poetry room. So I ran out of things to say, and I said, well, you know the Cat in the Hat. Why don't we write a poem about a cat? What rhymes with cat? And a voice here, Matt, and a voice there, rat. And then everybody's getting excited and they're throwing these words at me. And Amy rushes over with a pencil and a pad, and I just write them down, and then I say, this is too much, let's write a poem. Let me read you the first poem they wrote. This was the whole group, but there were about 6 or 7 who really loved it. And we called it Matt the Cat. I have samples of this little book we made as Christmas presents and gave to all the residents, and there are extras there. But I would appreciate it if you not remove them, because I need them. Maybe I'll read you a second one. A cat called Matt. We had a cat. We named him Matt. He wore a hat. Matt was fat. Matt was a fat cat, and he sat on a mat. Then we shouted, scat, scat, scat. He was a cat in a hat. He got bit by a rat and fell down flat. Imagine that. Wow, wow. This was, and Amy's walking by, and she says, that's great. I'll have to tell my brother Paul. Well, Paul, in the fall, went to the mall to spend a lot of money. He may not be tall, and he isn't small. He looks so very funny. He went to a stall to buy a red shawl. He found a new pair of blue socks. He picked up a ball, threw it at a wall. It came back on the back of a fox. Now, I have to tell you that the rhythm kind of was, I say, we need another word here. And then pretty soon other people would say, no, if one woman said, on a fox, she'd say, oh no, we got to put something in that. So they love to sing, and they know about, the residents remember to sing, and that music is their last touch, and they never forget that. So lo and behold, I had learned a new skill and a new way to make people comfortable. We formed a group. Amy made us a little room in the back, and she would round people up every time I walked in. Here's Martha, we're going to write poetry, who wants to come? And about 6 of them, 7 patients raised their hands, and they would follow us slowly, because many of them could not find the way. And they would sit down, and some of them would ask, why are we here? What are we going to do? And, well, the same thing we did last week. And eventually, I decided if I gave just one word, it would work. So for Christmas, the word was light. And they came up with all kinds of light. Sunlight, moonlight, lovers love moonlight, Christmas tree lights, Hanukkah lights. Marvelous. One day, what could I do? I said, let's write about musical instruments. I said, what's a musical instrument that we can rhyme with? And we picked flute. and somebody said drum. And, a few of them, somebody said clarinet, and I said, we're not going to be able to do clarinet. And they came up with a wonderful poem, and here also, called the Seabury Scribblers Ragtime Band. So that's the most important thing I learned again from the outside in. But the one I really like to talk about, and it's the hardest, is mental illness. People do not understand mental illness. They're frightened. They move away. And this is also a disease which you never recover from. The people at Sloan Kettering, most of them did not survive. Dementia patients do not get better, and people with mental illness must learn to live with it all their lives, or it will get worse and worse. Let me tell you a little bit that I know about bipolar disease. It's taken me 20 years to be able to try and tell people about it, not one-on-one. Everybody knows in this room who knows me, knows you ask me about it, and I will talk about it. That's why I'm not going to say much, and you can ask what you will, and if it's not too personal, I'll be very happy to answer. Everybody thinks when they have a bad mood and then they feel better, maybe I'm bipolar. But they used to call it manic depressive. You were either all the way up here, manic, doing strange, exotic, funny, crazy things, or you were way down there and you might commit suicide, right? That's not true. You can wake up one morning and feel like the world has come to an end. And 3 minutes later, if somebody says the right comforting word, you can feel better. I wrote in one day a poem called Anatomy, which you may have heard about how my body's falling apart, and I hate to look at my varicose veins. That afternoon, I wrote a poem called Wounds That Never Heal, because something triggered a memory. Bipolar is a sliding scale. There's a range of moods that everybody has, but bipolar is only the portion in the middle. Most people are not bipolar, but in the sense that you go up and down on this sliding scale, people may feel that way. Now, from the inside out, it is impossible to live with. You never know what's going to hurt, it takes years of talking to a really fine therapist, not just anybody, but one you simply talk to. And over time, suddenly, you begin to learn there's been a pattern in my life. Gee, that happened last year. Oh, when I was in college that happened. Hey, my mom used to say, my sisters used to say. And pretty soon you realize the pattern of things that make you feel bad. And at that point you're halfway home. Because once you can remember how deep it goes, you can avoid it, never get away. The triggers are all around you. But you learn to anticipate them and know them when they come, and then you have two choices. One is to stick up for yourself. I don't know how many people told me that if I was strong, I could do this. So you can't let them get you down. And the other thing you could do is just accept it. Just accept it and leave. Change the subject. Don't let the world make you plummet. And if you go down far enough, you won't come back again. I was hospitalized so far 3 times. The first time for 5 days, a total shock. I was 64. I had been single for over 20 years by then. Yeah, over 20 years. I had raised 2 children, put them through college, had a great career. How, at the age of 64, could I have had a nervous breakdown? Serious, in the hospital 5 days, sent home, luckily, to a great therapist. They put me in the hospital in White Plains because that was near where my sister lived. And I just lucked out. I found a great psychologist. It took me about a year or so before I even felt calm, always, most of the time. That's why I'm here. I had a son up here who kept rushing back and forth, and finally he said, please come to Connecticut. So I moved up here in terrible shape, trying to get a hold of everything because I didn't have the right doctor. That is the key. Find somebody who understands what you say and lets you just express how you really feel and be your comfort. That's what it takes. And I searched for almost 2 years, and I found a miracle worker named Dr. Richard A. Miller, who is currently close to being on his way out with Parkinson's disease. And I will mourn for him like I have never mourned for anybody else, because he saved my life. That's all I want to say. I'll answer anything that you say as long as it's not too personal. And it's better I not talk, but I will. Okay? So please ask me and I'll try to answer. Okay?
Thank you.
And if you want to get well, whatever a good doctor says, you should try. Now, what's a good doctor? I'll tell you what he is. He's one who trusts you and teaches you how to handle your own medication. When you feel bad, do you run for another pill? How often do you run? How much should you take? Should you say this one's not working? He'll let you know, she'll let you know. And in time, it's what they call reading your body. And I know there are days when I get up every morning of my life, I'm going to take a mood stabilizer. In other words, it's not going to let me get here or let me get there. Not good enough. Because with mental illness and dementia and being on the end of life, as they call it, you cannot avoid anxiety. Anxiety leads to panic. Panic was my first panic attack was when I landed in the hospital. And you'll know it. And you don't want to live with it. Indeed, I say I would rather die of lung cancer than die in the middle of a panic attack. It's the kind of thing that paralyzes you. You can't go in. You're afraid of being inside, so you go outside, you're afraid of being outside. So you talk to somebody, you're afraid what they say. A bus comes, you're afraid to get on the bus. You run to the bus because you're afraid on the street. It has been called, in extreme cases, PTSD. It's like being hit in the face. And it's got all sorts of manifestations. I thought I had an allergy. I thought I was smelling perfume too much. And the whole front of my face went numb. And I went to an allergist, and she said, quickly, you're not dying, you don't have an allergy. What you have is what we call vocal cord dysfunction. Usual among people who have coaches who press them too hard. And I said, I felt like I got punched in the face, my whole face. Now I have a new clue. I know when I look in the mirror and my eyes go like this, it's bad news. So I take that one in the morning, and every night I take even the tiniest thing of an anxiety preventer, which allows me to sleep. As I learned, the most important thing, you will never get better if you don't get a good night's sleep. My first reaction was I would consider myself a failure if I had to take a pill for the rest of my life.
Thank you so much for all the insightful and courageous things you've had to say. I'm curious about the writing group down at the Meadows. Are they still writing poetry, and can we hear or see some more of it?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You can look at, I just picked, we needed a pamphlet in a hurry. It was the week before Christmas. So I just picked a few, starting with the first, which was the fun stuff, to the last, which turned out to be the only prose poem we ever wrote, and they loved it. I just said, let's write some prose poetry. Let's start with I am. Looked at me and I said, well, look, I am happy. Slowly but surely, the biggest group, men, there are not too many men there. Men came over and they'd say, oh, I like doing this, oh, I like, and it was just another form of therapy, and they were happy. So we continued it all year. I have well over 30 poems, and I'm publishing them all in a book called Comfort is the Key, Writing Poetry with the Seabury Scribblers, a name they picked with Amy's help. And I will describe how it happened, what goes on in that building, and then each poem, every one I got, with a little thing underneath about how they felt about it, and a conclusion at the end. And I would be delighted if somebody knew a publisher who would let me do it, because it's very expensive to self-publish. Yes.
Would you like to say something about the book that you have in the back?
Oh, sure.
And again, hold the mic down just a little bit.
Okay. This is very interesting. I was married to a writer, so I figured I couldn't write, right? I was cleaning my desk recently. I was 78 years old. And what did I find but a story called Willow, which is in the book back there. And that is an experience I had, though told as a story. I don't like writing memoir per se, but everything I write is pretty well based on things I've either seen, which was a lot, or experiences I had. Willow was this very sad, the saddest case. She was a young girl whose parents had put her in there because they were fighting over a divorce and they didn't have time. The poor girl was dreadful. I had gone home and written a story that was really good. It's in that book, it's buried in that book, because that might turn people off. So there's a book called Jewish Rye that I self-published 4 years ago that I still have to sell 600 copies to break even. And so they're in the back. And I don't want to do that again with Comfort is the Key, but I want to write Comfort is the Key first. Everybody hears me. Oh, I'm working on a story. Oh, I got a great idea. Oh, I'm going to give a lecture. But the thing I want to do right now is finish Comfort is the Key, because I think more, this isn't, I didn't say the most important thing. It is our obligation to recognize it in other people. And that's almost impossible, because you have to recognize their triggers. I have to know if I say, I had a teacher in the 3rd grade and she made me sit in the corner. If somebody really hurts and I notice, I'm of help right away, because I know what to say and I know how to react. People don't understand what you wake up on a good day and you can talk to me about something that really was terrible. And I make a funny poem and I laugh about it. If I wake up in the morning down and you say the same thing, I could stay in bed for the whole weekend and eventually write probably the best poem I've ever written. Some of my best poems are either nostalgia or sadness, loss. And others are very funny. Everybody likes my poem, I Don't Give a Fig for My Wig, which is the way I usually introduce myself. I found out if you make people laugh at the beginning, in the end, they'll forgive what's in the middle.
If you'll forgive me, I would like to start before the question with a little preface, which is that I thank you deeply for sharing your diagnosis and how you live with your illness. That is remarkable and very touching. It means a lot. I also would like to say how delightful it is that you've shared your gifts of creativity and widened our appreciation of the art of film and our knowledge of history through your enthusiasm for film. Now the question is...
Good. I don't want to start crying.
You had a career, so you had a day job. Your full-time job wasn't going at night and helping people.
Oh, that's the other thing in my book. You really like my book. It makes great presents, by the way. Especially when Hanukkah comes, I thought I was going to sell 1 million of them, and I sold 7. What was the question?
Your day job.
My day job. The greatest stroke of luck, not the greatest thing. The greatest thing was having my 2 sons. The greatest stroke of luck was becoming a computer programmer at the age of 20, not quite 21, in January. 2 weeks before my birthday I started, and how did that happen? That's in my book. It's called The Foot in the Door, and is the introduction to a memoir about the computer business. I got a summer job. I was a college student. I went to an agency, a temp agency, find me some work. Well, I could type, and I could, So she looks through a thing. Well, I only have a 2-day job at Remington Rand. There's somebody sick. And you could go in there and, work for 2 days, and I'll find you something else. So I walk in, and I'm a very polite, I know how to answer questions and take messages, and I can type. So at the end of 2 days, I go to my supervisor to get my timesheet approved, and she says, "Have you got any more time this summer?" I said, "Oh, I have the whole summer." She said, "Let me call personnel." And she calls personnel, and I hear her, "Yes, yes, oh yeah, she knows how to, yeah, she'd be good at that, I think." And she turns to me and she says, there's this crazy group of people up on the 10th floor, don't know what they do, but they just finished writing a book called Basic Programming 1 for the UNIVAC machine. She said they need somebody to type it. It'll take you a few weeks. So I took the job. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that in 1952, I had listened to Eisenhower Returns, okay? And it had been announced as the machine versus man. And as the results came in, this funny machine called the UNIVAC would make predictions, and they'd see who got there first. Adlai Stevenson was a shoo-in, they said. All the papers said he's going to win by a landslide. So the returns keep coming in, start coming in, trickling in, and there are the accountant types and the statisticians looking over the numbers and waiting, and suddenly at about 9 o'clock in the evening, CBS announcer says it's very strange. This machine is no good at all because it's predicting Stevenson's going to lose. And everybody laughs. By midnight, so the programmers went back to their flowcharts and pencils like I used to use and looked at the number. They found an error and they quickly fixed it. What we call now, they tweaked it. What we call a bug, they now call, not a bug, there's another word, that makes Windows come down crashing all the time. They're bugs, they're mistakes. They've corrected it. The computer keeps churning, and at midnight it says that not only is Eisenhower going to win, he's going to win by a landslide. At that point, the CBS laughed, the announcer laughed. You know, this machine isn't worth anything, and when we woke up in the morning, Eisenhower had won by a landslide. That's the only thing I knew about UNIVAC, so I took the job, and it was interesting. I was learning what RAM was, and how you input, and keying, and those machines that went like that, and I find this one sentence that says, so therefore, if x equals 2, 2x equals 22. So I took it and I went to the guy in charge, the head of the department. I said, Gene, you have a mistake in your manual. And he said, you're not a programmer. You're just a typist. You're bright, but let me see. And when I let him see it, he said, you should be a programmer. And they invited me back as I went through college, and I was graduating January 15th. 2 weeks before my 21st birthday. At Thanksgiving, I went in, and they had been, every summer I worked there, every summer. I came in, and I went to Gene and whoever, and I said, you know, I'm graduating, and he took out a book, and he said, can you start on the 15th? And I said, we have a new course. And I said, well, I'm graduating on 17th. So I had to get special permission from the dean, and that's how I got in the business. And 60 years later, I retired, not by my choice, though I knew I was not so bright anymore, but because I got eased out by the younger generation. Wow. That's my computer experience.
Maybe one more question?
I don't really have a question as much as an observation. And I echo Alice's appreciation, Martha, as you're sharing your life experience with us all. But I think it makes me think of how many times we must inadvertently hurt people.
Absolutely.
Put our foot in it.
I think people have to be intuitive. I think they really do. They have to be able to put themselves, it's more than sympathy. It's more than compassion. It's empathy. Could you put yourself in that person's place? And if you can't, just do the best you can. If you see them squirming, just change the topic. I think the most important thing that I can do, and I'm trying to make connections, is meet college students far from home for the first time in their life, helping them, giving them support, and telling them they are not going to go further down. Most of them get very depressed, and there's a terrible chance that they'll commit suicide. The ones who go too high and think they can conquer the world, which is my problem. My real problem originally was clinical psychology. It is now going over the top. And I've even had people here come over to me and say, would you like me to go like this when you're too high up? I know I'm too high up, and I can bring myself down in no time. And I want the young people not to get frightened and not to get up there and run around thinking they can kill the world, and then they do.
Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your honesty. We appreciate you.
Thank you for listening, and spread the word. I want to spread the word that mental illness is a real thing and it is a wound that never heals. Thank you.
Very courageous of you to
I didn't want